Welcome back to Unsolicited. This is where we give you the unsolicited insights you didn't know you needed about all things government contracting. And today I'm super excited because we are joined by a couple of folks who know how to turn complex systems into strategies and real world results. So first, we have Rick Adams, a solutions architect with Zigabyte. He's the kind of IT professional who can take a look at a system, a migration plan, and a coffee cup and figure out how to make all three run more efficiently. So he's led projects across international teams and has built a reputation for designing enterprise systems that actually work, not just look good on paper. Then, alongside him, we have Josh Brodbent, Principal Capture Strategist at Zigabyte. Josh started his IT career at the ripe young age of 12, and that means that the rest of us were playing the video games. He was probably securing the network that they were running on. And so with over 2 decades in cybersecurity, identity management, and zero trust strategy, Josh has helped federal agencies protect millions of users and modernize how they think about security and compliance. Gentlemen, welcome.
Thank you. Glad to be here.
Thank you for having us.
Yeah, we're super glad to have you on. I was reading over all the notes, the things that we want to talk about, and all of it was fresh to me. So I would like to just jump right in. And Josh, I'm going to ask you my first question because I want us to talk a little bit about contract vehicles. You guys threw that out in the hinterlands. And so what I want to know is, from your perspective, what are the actual benefits of being on a contract vehicle like SBEAS, GSA, SeaPort, and then how does that shape the way you approach capture and delivery at Zigabyte?
Yeah, so the biggest benefit for contract vehicles is speeding up the acquisition process. So you've gone through various stages of vetting. You have offered either past performance or some proposals and timing. And from there, when you are having a conversation about a challenge or a need that needs to be met, whether in the case of SBEAS in the Air Force or others, you have a way, a clear path forward for acquisition to be able to start those. One of the typical challenges you see in government is that the procurement process and paperwork process in government moves at the speed of a glacier. And so by the time you have proposed a solution and you're trying to get it implemented, especially in the realm of cybersecurity, by the time it gets through normal procurement processes, that tech is outdated and it's going to end up on a shelf. So if we're really trying to solve modern challenges, we have to be able to attack and capture contract vehicles that actually accelerate procurement so we can do something and not just sit there with our hands tied while our adversaries advance.
So the contract vehicle, then, if I'm understanding this correctly, is kind of like a fast pass at a theme park, right? You get to move quicker. It's like a cleared lane because the rules are already set. It's just you've established how you get to move through there, and you move faster because of it.
Right. And in the case of some of those contract vehicles like SBEAS, you also get to work very closely with the program office. So not only are you in a fast lane, but to continue your analogy, you know the ride workers. So when you get up there, they know you by name, they know which seat you like, they know, and I'm going to say, I wish it moved that fast, but it is significantly faster than trying to find an alternate method to procurement.
That's fair. We talked to a guest not too terribly long ago who mentioned to us that if you're using some of the more just traditional procurement systems trying to find work, access work, you're already years behind.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. Okay, well, so Rick, I'd like to hear from you a little bit. Let's talk about access and visibility versus competition and scope constraints. When we're talking about your being on a vehicle, SBEAS, for example, has certain things that you will look for on that vehicle specifically. And if it's not on that vehicle, then you've got to go somewhere else. So, talk to me a little bit about access and visibility versus competition and scope constraints.
Well, Josh is more the person to talk about SBs, but I can talk a little bit about something a little different that ties into this, and that's what's called OTA, Other Transaction Authority. For example, when we went to Columbia, Maryland, and visited with DISA to sell the ICAM implementation, which is now known as Enterprise ICAM with DISA, that was an OTA. And that allowed us to bring in an entire solution stack with different vendors, different partners. In that case, we partnered with GDIT as part of that. And that the OTA process is designed to help small businesses where we fit in to get in where traditionally large primes may be the only go-to. And so it opens doors for us to, like Josh said, it opens doors where we can move faster. Maybe we can bring solutions that previously weren't necessarily acceptable. Like they didn't, vendors who don't have what's called an ATO or approval to operate for their product within the DoD allows us to bring those solutions to the table and vet those as part of the process. And so the OTA process has been very helpful for us going through that cycle.
So I like that you bring that up. I like that we're not just talking about the fact that a vehicle can help you move faster, but that there
Hmm.
are other options that help you move faster as well.
Yes,
I,
exactly.
I think it's good. It's important. It's not just things that vendors need to know. Obviously, there's a lot of, contracting professionals that are trying to figure out where they can go look for the right fit of a vendor. And so sometimes if you're on that OTA and you're able to provide them things that maybe they hadn't thought about already, you can help them
Hmm.
move faster. Okay, I
Yeah.
like it. So, I mean, Josh, Rick, either one, tell me really if I'm on that vehicle or I have access to that vehicle, is that really a differentiator or is that just the cost of entry anymore?
So, from a vendor perspective, some of those end up being the cost of entry, but it can be a differentiator depending on the customer that you're working with, because each customer has their preference of what contract vehicle they want to use across the range of federal and DoD entities. And so, because of that, depending on how they release it or release the proposal or the project that they're working on, they it can be a differentiator because now you've narrowed the scope of vendors that can reply to people who actually are already vetted on that particular contract. Um, so while it's not necessarily a unique differentiator, it definitely narrows the lane that you have to be in and the people that you have to compete against. The flip side of that is those other people that you're competing against probably are coming to the dance or attempting to come to the dance with as much firepower as you are, so to speak. So they're going to be stronger competitors.
Yeah.
So that's the part that you have to kind of weed through and understand. So.
Is there a way that if you have access to that vehicle, then that you have an opportunity to do any kind of pre work? Are there things that can be done ahead of time so you're not scrambling? Should you have an opportunity to go after work you find on a vehicle?
Yeah, so a big part of that is networking and understanding who your peers are. So as we have things that come out on SBs, for example, we have a small list of very valued partners that we understand their strengths, right? So now when something's dropped, it's not just, hey, is that something that we want to go after? But it's like, hey, we have access to this vehicle. We know that we can do this, and we also know this partner with past performance that we work really well with, like NTI. So um, we get there, and that's the pre-work, right? That's the understanding. Because um, if you have something drop on a contract and you're not prepared from a teaming perspective of who's going to go get that work, then you're behind more than you were, because the truth is you were behind when something dropped and you didn't know it was dropping. So
Yeah, yeah. No, I love the idea that, one, the government is trying to figure out how to streamline the processes. We're trying to figure out how to get faster at it. I love the point you make that we don't want to be the reason that our ability to defend our nation is slow, right? We've
Right.
got to be efficient. We're doing the hard work alongside our military teammates, but we can't do the hard work if we're not in the seat, right? So
Right.
we've got to move faster. So is there, I guess this is just, a thought that I would gather, is there something that you would hope that contracting officers might put a clause or an attachment or something that could cut days off of potentially Q&A, pricing, anything like that, because they've already put it in the verbiage as you're looking at a solicitation? Is there anything like that that could help a contracting officer make this more efficient for you?
Yeah, so a couple of things. Number one, I mean, clarity is always important, right? So when you're writing an RFP, understanding what you're asking for is very important. Understanding how a proposal is going to be evaluated is very important. If we're dealing with tables and cells, understanding which cell is ultimately the one that gets evaluated and is important. Those things are all important. One thing that I've seen before that is recently in a few RFIs that I've responded to is the contracting officer, whoever's releasing the RFI, has actually asked the question, do you have a suggestion for a way to acquire this? What's your path to contract? Like, what's the fastest way to do this? And I'm paraphrasing their verbiage, right? They obviously use more government language than that. But that's fantastic, because when you have access to people who have a career in military and are retired, and they understand intimately all of the contract vehicles and alternates like OTAs that someone could go after, then they can help that contracting officer. They can say, hey, look, this is novel technology that falls under this particular scope. And because of that, we view this as something that doesn't actually need to be put out, but rather can have something else written for it. So, pre-RFP in that RFI stage, I would encourage contracting officers, as they have these, to solicit that feedback from vendors, because if you're releasing that to get information, having helpful information, or not just about the project that you're thinking about, but about how to get there, is just as important.
Yeah, it's good old-fashioned brainstorming.
Right.
Right? Because your one head might think of a single thing, or if your brain is in a rut because that's the thing you always ever do, let someone or someone's else help you see something through a different lens. Give yourself an opportunity to do it differently. Oh, I love it.
And to kind of break down the pre-work into more layman's terms, if you've already set up an account with Amazon and you've got your credit card saved with Amazon and your delivery address and all of these things, and you already have all of that set up with Amazon and you're looking to purchase something, why would you then go to Newegg or Walmart and just to have to do all of that work again? Why wouldn't you just stay with where you already have the account and already have all your information set up? Right.
Okay.
And so having the contract deal like that is similar in analogy to that, where you already know the assets you're looking at, you already have your stuff set up, and it's just more of a streamlined process to make that transaction happen.
Okay. So let's shift gears a little bit, because I'm curious about this thing I saw on our sheet. We're talking about zero trust a lot. Like, I hear the term and the buzzword zero trust. It's making its way around. If I were a squadron commander and I was new and someone had to give me something to understand this within the first 90 days, what would you explain to me zero trust is?
Rick, I'll let you go first.
Yeah, so zero trust, like you said, it's a big buzzword, right? So zero trust is very similar to where the term cloud was if you go back 20 or 25 years. Like when you talk about cloud, SaaS offerings were available, applications in the internet were available, all those things were there, but there wasn't really a marketing or a brand to solidify and unify all of those offerings to a solution, right? And so when the term cloud was adopted, now all of a sudden these things that existed before had something to hang their hat on and go sell, right? And make an actual product out of it. And so zero trust is very similar to that. When we talk about minimal access rights, privileged access management. When we talk about ICAM, identity, credential, and access management, we talk about all these different components. These are things that have been around for decades. Zero Trust gives a branding around a lot of those methodologies and a lot of those components to where people can get their head wrapped around putting those things together as a comprehensive solution. So getting like you said, squadron commander, getting him to understand what all of that actually means. It's an evolution of what good practices have been. For example, firewalls. Zero Trust has this thing in it called micro-segmentation. What does that mean, right? Well, traditionally, firewalls have been, the brick walls, so to speak, around a network, securing the perimeter, whereas microsegmentation is moving those brick walls further and further inside. So imagine, you have a base and you have a fence around the base, but now you have a fence around every house or every building on the base, right? So it's bringing that security closer and closer into the actual resource, to the assets that need to be secured. So that as an example.
Okay, so it's kind of like if I were on a military installation, there's no permanent all access badge to get to everywhere on the installation just because you've seen me before. It's one of those things that you've got to check me to be valid for that mission each time to make sure that we're doing zero trust, that you belong here. Okay.
Yeah,
okay.
so I like to think of it.
Yeah,
go ahead.
Go ahead.
No, go ahead. Finish that, Rick.
I was going to say, you have to show your CAC to get on base, right? And then when you go to every building, you have to badge in with your CAC to access that building. Well, when you badge into that building, that access request is actually saying, hey, do you have access to this building right now? Are you supposed to have it right now? So maybe it was okay for you to get on base. Maybe you had access to this building yesterday, but you're not supposed to have access to it today. And so those are some of the principles that Zero Trust is bringing to the table.
Okay, Josh, what were your thoughts? You were about to.
Yeah, so I like to think of it rather than zero trust as just no inherent trust. So I don't inherently trust who you are just because you smile and you walk into a building and you're like, oh, I left my card somewhere. No, I have to know who you are and I have to know why you're there, even if I know who you are. It's a lot like my oldest son is reaching the driving age and they have these wonderful little like valet keys that I can set the speedometer to the key. Most newer vehicles have them. And so when he gets in the car, he's allowed to be in the car. He's allowed to turn the car on because he has a key. But I have defined parameters around how he can drive in that car. So his speed limit may be 75. His speed limit may be 55. His speed limit may be 35 if I want to embarrass him. We'll see how that goes. But at the end of the day, I have taken and limited him to a specific subset of what that vehicle is allowed to do.
You realize you're going to make me go find the bottom of the internet on that. What you just said, I never even knew that was a thing. But okay.
So what's really funny is like in I think it's Dodge Challenger Hellcats. The master key is red and the other key is black. And so you can set the speed limit on the black key, but if you have the red key, you can go as fast as you want.
Okay, that's pretty neat.
But yeah, so I think of Zero Trust much that same way. It's really about defining who is supposed to have access when to what specific set of resources. And to that end, to the micro-segmentation end, as Rick was talking about, it's really not a product that you buy, it's a mindset that you have. It is that mindset of just because I trusted you yesterday doesn't mean I trust you today.
Yeah.
And even if I trust you, I only trust you to have access to the things you're supposed to have access to.
And only today.
And only today,
yeah.
right? Because that could change tomorrow.
help me understand then, if zero trust is actually working, what is a friction that should go down and a security signal maybe that should go up? How do I, let's take me back to my commander analogous, how do I know it's working?
So from that perspective, there's a couple of ways that you know it's working. Number one, unfortunately, the thing that goes up from a security signal standpoint is an attempt at unauthorized access, right? Because you realize that people are starting to access things that they really weren't supposed to have access to, at least in the beginning, until they realize that it's shut out. But from there, you have a lot more inside your network. You have a lot more authentication traffic and authorization traffic. So essentially, because things are determining multiple applications across your network, multiple systems across your network are constantly determining who has access to what and whether or not their role or attribute has changed every time they check in. You're going to have a lot more of those signals across, because we're not handing somebody a privilege token for 36 hours and just letting them roll with it, right? When they switch applications, now they've got to be authorized again and authenticated, not necessarily authenticated, but they have to be authorized again against the system that they're working on to make sure that they can now switch applications and go to the next thing.
So it's a little more work up front. Oh, sorry. Go ahead, Rick.
I was going to say a practical example of that is the work we did at SABRE for the Air Force, SABRE's Secret and Below Releasable Environment. It's a mission partner coalition environment to where we were able to work with the UK, work with Australia, work with CENTCOM. We were able to bring multiple mission partners together. And in that scenario, the focus was SharePoint access using what's called ABAC, attribute-based access controls. So one of the things you mentioned is, where does friction come down? So traditionally, you would have a DD2875 or a SAR workflow process where somebody have to make a request, get authorized to something, and do all of those things before they get access to a SharePoint repository. With ABAC policies, you're able to look at their attributes. Is this person have the right country of affiliation? Do they have the right clearance level? Are all of these attributes associated with them correct? And if so, they have access to that material. And so we were able to grant access to different SharePoint repositories based on, if you're secret versus top secret versus CUI versus, UK, US, all those different types of things, and make that in real time. And so, like Josh is saying, now I have ongoing, not just authentication requests saying, yes, we can verify you are who you say you are, but now we have authorization requests on an ongoing basis. Every time somebody tries to access that SharePoint repository or that document in that repository, we get an authorization check. And that's a record where we can say, yes, that person's authorization checked out, or no, it didn't. Go flag a security officer and let them know something's going on. And so that gives us real-time feedback and input to answer your question, like, how do you know it's working? How do you know it's not working? When people can access their information more seamlessly without a lot of approval overhead, that's a good positive sign. But then also on the negative side, if somebody is failing that access, we're able to automate that process of notifying security officers, supervisors, whoever that may be, that need to know.
Good. So when does this have to happen? What's the deadline and who's driving it?
2027. So the Department of Defense deadline is 2027. And the OCIO at the Pentagon is driving it, right? So I mean, that's there. Will we make it? Time will tell. But that's the deadline.
Yeah. Okay. So then here we go. When we're talking about zero trust and we're talking about systems just in general, let's explore a little bit about how enterprise systems and modernization initiatives intersect with zero trust, data strategy, and emerging AI capabilities. So when people in government contracting talk about enterprise systems, it can mean a lot of different things. Everything, as you mentioned, Rick, from or it was both you and Rick, that cloud migration and data integration to workflow automation and cybersecurity, like I could get lost in this conversation of enterprise systems. But from where you both sit, what does enterprise systems really mean in today's federal landscape? And then how do you see agencies balancing modernization goals with realities of legacy infrastructure and budget constraints?
Yeah, so this is very, very common issue across multiple customers that we deal with. Enterprise systems typically are those systems that span the enterprise, as the name implies, and not to sound flippant about that, but we work within the DoD. We work with a lot of smaller organizations like AFRL out in Rome, New York. That's a lower end system. They have their own systems. Maybe they have their own Active Directory domain or Active Directory forest. Maybe they have their own ICAM implementation, things like that. Whereas the Air Force, looking at Air Force Identity, AFID, they're looking across the entire enterprise. How do we solve these security challenges? How do we solve these identity management challenges across the entire enterprise known as the Air Force? This is looking at that even larger. How do we solve that management of identities across the entire DoD? And then how do we integrate that with other federal agencies, not just within the DoD, right? So
Okay.
when you talk about enterprise systems, you're talking about looking across the entire breadth of the enterprise and trying to solve those problems at the big picture level. Whereas when you get down to the base level, things like that's a different level of system that you're looking at.
Anything to add from you there, Josh?
Yeah, so when I think about enterprise systems, I think the easiest way to describe those are any system, whether that is a workflow, process, or application, by which a mission gets accomplished or is assisted. So when you think of it in that perspective, the challenge with modernization is as much dealing with people workflow as it is applications. When you have
Explain.
regulations that were written for forms and paper and triplicate, and those are no longer necessary because we can automate all of that. But the regulation still exists, therefore the paper still exists. It's difficult to modernize a system that is legally mandated to have paper involved. Like that's just one of those challenges that you're going to have.
Calls out plans.
Right. So
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
so as you look at enterprise systems, you're looking at how an enterprise functions inside the DoD. That's mission readiness. That is how are we going after the mission of our department. And in order to modernize those systems, yes, digital is super important to that. How we secure that, how it functions, how it authorizes and authenticates are all important. But if our leadership is still stuck in the 1950s to understand that, hey, we need to be able to have that form that we can go back and point to because nobody's ever forged a form before, then we're going to have difficulty in getting our systems modernized when our processes can't catch up.
100%. And I love your input, and I love the way both you and Rick introduce this in a way that even me, the novice and zero like cyber or IT background, can understand it. So thank you both for that. But help me real quick understand, and this is for either of you, what counts as modernization and not just like a tools refresh?
Yeah, so
Yes.
one of the things you mentioned earlier is AI, and one of the things Josh just mentioned is regulations, right? So, for example, we recently responded to an RFI that wants to use AI to automate the management of their ICAM solution. Well, how does that play in? Like I mentioned earlier about DD 2875, SAR workflows where a security officer has to sign, a supervisor has to sign, an information owner has to sign, all these kind of things. That's a paperwork-based process that we've digitized. You introduce AI into that, that's true modernization. That's what's going to be the standard for decades to come, right? How do the regulations need to keep up with that so that we can introduce AI to automate those types of processes and that type of access management when we're still dependent on a system access request type of workflow. So I think the DoD is going to have to address some of those challenges when we talk about true modernization, not just software upgrades.
100%. And so, Josh, I want to pick your brain on this because I saw something that you put forward talking about how this sort of modernization using AI can help with some of the things that aren't what everyone assumes AI is, like techie, cyber, all of that. I spent a lot of time in our company doing human resources. One of my responsibilities was onboarding. And so you mentioned use of AI to assist with tasks and like that. Like, explain what that was.
Yeah, so as LLMs grow, people have their particular opinion about AI and large language models, and a lot of times the first thing that pops in their head is Grok or ChatGPT or things that help you write a document or things like that. But the truth is, where it shines and where it's going to end up really shining inside an enterprise system is its ability to correlate data. So, in the instance of onboarding someone, the federal government as a whole is one of the largest employers in the country. Therefore, as an aggregate, it probably has more HR data and role data than almost any other entity in the world. There could come a point where onboarding a role from a permissions perspective and from a taxation perspective, withholdings, all of those things, the person doesn't actually have to answer a question. They might confirm it if you want to keep people in the workflow. But the data correlates so well that the truth is you're able to, within a margin of error, most of these LLMs, once they're trained correctly, are able to make an assumption about basic data. And so you can see human tasks automated, like onboarding. One of the things that I was kind of calling out in that is the same holds true when you go to onboard an enterprise system into a centralized identity store. So today, the challenge of that, one of the biggest challenges is simply policy. It's, okay, this system over here has a list of attributes that it defines as things. And sometimes it's simple and you can figure it out. Like some places call it a last name, some people call it a surname. Like, it's silly, but you get it. But there are others that become more complex when you start talking about employee identification numbers or internal attributes to a particular department or agency. They become more complex. And so it has to not just map those attributes, but then it has to define roles and what role will get each attribute. Because unfortunately, in the Department of Defense, as Rick talked about earlier with like the SAR form, things tend to be role-based. That is something that should change over time, but they tend to be role-based. So now we have to decide, out of this list of things, where do these roles match? And so people have to do that by hand. Sometimes we do it by scripts to find very similar things like last name and surname, but most of the time those attributes have to get mapped by hand, and then the policies for roles have to then, again, be generated by a person deciding who gets access to what.
Okay, so
before
it's
they
kind
can
of
join
like
together.
it's like a medic that is doing triage, right? So the easy
Right.
cases get sorted first, but the non-cookie cutter case still has to have a human sort of discern their way through that thing potentially.
Right. And
Okay.
the idea behind using an LLM for that type of app onboarding is that the LLM will then remember what that human did the next time.
Okay.
So once you get an aggregate of data, the number of things that require a human interaction for that mapping become less and less because it understands the correlation you made. It's not just like, you remember those stupid tests in school where you had to like match the vocab word to its definition and like draw the line?
Yes.
Well, that's not the way that it's working. Instead, an LLM is understanding that word has a Latin root, and therefore every other word that has that Latin root also means some form of this.
Dang. So, well, then I guess like a lot of these LLMs even have a little caveat in the bottom that says, hey, check your work because mistakes can be made here, right? So the biggest hurdle may not be the technology. It may be our trust in the automation of that technology. Yes?
Absolutely. It's always going to be our trust in the automation of that technology. And yes, it is that technology is not perfect. However, the advancements in the model are so significant that their number of hallucinations and errors tend to reduce with every revision. In addition to that, though, one of the reasons that AI hallucinates is that people think about with ChatGPT and Grok is because the temperature is set on it in such a way that it allows it to do that. So you can actually configure those to say, hey, if you don't know, I don't want you to guess.
Hey,
Okay.
Josh, can you explain that real quick? Can you explain to those who may not understand what hallucination is when it comes to AI?
Yeah, so I'll actually give a great example on this because it's one of my favorite. The whole zero trust conversation I like to compare to castle and moat. The concept that prior to zero trust, when we had perimeter-based defense, it was like having a castle and then we put a moat around it, and that was a firewall and eventually a managed firewall and yada yada yada. Anyway, so I was having fun with AI one day and we were talking about this. I was like, okay, what else could you add? And AI told me that in some cases in Middle Ages in Europe, they added alligators and sharks to the moat, which is not a historical thing, and they're not native animals to those regions. But AI just made it up. Like the more I asked it, the more it would just make up because it didn't know. So LLMs have a defining setting called temperature, which essentially tells it, okay, here's your margin of error. Here's your room to guess and be really wrong. So when we're doing things like this, we would set that way down and basically say, if you don't know, surface that. If you don't have a 90% confidence level, so I'm a big nerd. I will say that from the outset. So I play with this stuff a lot. And one of the things that I have actually built an LLM to do is sort my email because I get really annoyed with it. But yeah, it's a long story that's going to take way too much time. But one of the things that I taught it to do with that is give me a level of confidence based on its temperature. So if it only sorts it if it has like an 85% or higher confidence level, that's actually what it is. Otherwise, it leaves it alone.
It's pretty cool because otherwise this could turn into a D&D match, right? It could
right, exactly,
score based on all kinds of made up stories.
Right, exactly, yeah.
Hey, your charisma's 20 or something. Yeah, okay.
Exactly. So, but yeah, so I mean, it's fascinating. You can. One day I was playing, and this is actually not that long ago. I was playing with ChatGPT, and I was asking it to make me a playlist based on my musical preferences, like to give me a playlist. And a solid third of the songs that it listed didn't exist. And I mean that's an easy one. It could have web searched it easily. So, but it was funny because I was like, yeah, these songs aren't real because I know that artist and I know they didn't release that song. And so
it was just making things up.
It was just making things up.
Oh, that's scary. Okay, well, so I could literally pick both of your brains all day long because there is so much I know I don't know, right? But we are on a limited time frame here. So as we start to roll out of this conversation, here's what I'd like before we wrap up. I just want you to know I trust both of you for your answers, right? So here you go. Each of you I'm looking for. Can you give us your unsolicited opinion on future of government contracting and zero trust? Like what do you see either changing, improving, or going more toward the zero trust requirement? Question mark.
I'll let
So
you go first.
I can go first. Yeah. So first of all, like I mentioned earlier, the OTAs, that is becoming more and more prevalent. That's allowing different organizations to move faster and adopt newer technologies, not just old school solutions, right? So that's a big direction where things are heading. When it comes to zero trust and the adoption, like 2027 was mentioned earlier, we're in crunch time, right? I mean, this is clutch city at this point, right? So we've got to get some answers on the books really, really fast to solve some of these problems. We need to be able to automate more of what we're doing with zero trust. We feel AI is a definitive answer in that equation. So is that going to move forward? Yes. How it moves forward and the pace at which DoD adopts those solutions, that's what's left to be seen. But definitely those are things I see coming down the pipe.
Okay, good. Thank you.
Yeah, for me, I agree. So zero trust adoption is going to continue. It is perpetually going to be a direction that we head. I did a cigar and couch conversation, and somebody asked when cybersecurity ended, and I just kind of chuckled, and I was like, yeah, and that's not a thing that's going to happen. So I mean, zero trust is going to continue as an architecture that we develop. From a contracting perspective, we heard earlier in the summer the interim CIO of the Department of Defense introduced the concept of the SWIFT program, which was allowing software companies to bypass the DISA ATO process and basically kind of pre-stage some stuff, be able to do some stuff faster. And when I listened to them have a conversation, it was clear that they understood the challenge of, if we don't figure out how to deploy significantly faster, we are absolutely going to be left behind by our adversaries. So, every 3 months at this point, the iteration of software and security software that have come out over the past few months is, I can't describe it at this point. And so, we've had our first instance of a payload that was literally nothing but an LLM call that wrote itself on a computer. So if we can't acquire security tools and implement security practices faster than the 9 to 18 months it takes to acquire software in the military today, we're not going to exist. So we're just going to have to decide what we do.
It's scary, right? So we need to make a decision, and then we need to execute. We need to execute quickly, right? So maybe one day, Rick, Josh, we have you guys back, talk to us about these OTAs to help us figure out how things do move faster as we learn more about that. But I say we, I mean me, because I'm sure everybody else in the room is smarter on it than I am. But there you have it, folks. Rick, Josh, thank you very much. Thank you to everyone for tuning in. You guys can learn more about Josh and Rick on LinkedIn, and you can learn anything you want to know about Zigabyte at zigabyte.com. We're grateful for having you guys join us. I appreciate all of your input, and I appreciate all of you, and look forward to seeing you next time here on Unsolicited.